So Lars, the offensive line is really interesting. I think this conversation needs to start with Fa'alili Fa'amoe from Washington State, where we just had a conversation about not turning down talent. You could feel great if you're the coaching staff. You could feel great about going into 2025 with Maximus McCree, Carver Willis, and Jedd Fisch as, you're going to figure that out for your starting tackles. That's fine. If you bring Fa'amoe in, all of a sudden that changes because Willis and Fa'amoe are your two starting tackles, and you feel awesome about that. And then you have the rest of the talent battled out for two spots on the interior. And I say two because Landon Hatchett is going to be the starting center. And I think that's a really solid place to be for this offensive line. And I don't know how this recruitment is going to play out, but that is absolutely a name to watch.
I don't know how deep I want to go in on this, but I'm going to, as a Wazoo alum, I'm going to push back a little bit here because I don't know if you, and again, there's certain reports where, we heard some rumblings about Jonte when he left Texas and the mutual parting of ways and all those sorts of things.
Sure.
That I can excuse because Sark got up in front of the media and said, hey, look, mutual parting of ways, felt good, shaking hands, bygones be bygones, and let him into the portal, do what he needs to do. Did you hear the story about Fa'amoe when he, midway through the season, asked for a raise in NIL, and then he wouldn't play the rest of the season? So I don't want to put that on the kid, but I do think this is worth discussing because I think there are certain guys where you can, what headache is worth it? Is it a guy where, as much as Drew has already struggled this season, and certainly Fa'amoe would be an upgrade in that regard, is it worth the risk reward of, hey, if this guy, ends up, wanting to dip out halfway through next season? And I want to be clear. I'm not saying that this is 100% the case, but I'm just saying when you have a report like that where it's like, okay, well, I haven't heard anybody truly refute that. And to me, that's a little, I know Wazoo was in a tough situation this year and nobody wants to hear about it, but I do think that's kind of an interesting thing to monitor. Whereas for me, the offensive line, I would go look at like a DJ Wingfield, like an interior guy where I don't necessarily think tackle is a need. I agree it needs to be improved, but I think the onus is on Brendan Carroll and his coaching staff to get Drew as a party right because you also have Carver and Max. So and we also, worth noting, did see Max get some work at right tackle in pregame warmups and things like that. So he could also be a potential right tackle situation if they put Carver at left or Carver goes to right and somebody else stays at left.
But I think the main point with Fa'amoe here, because I don't disagree with what you're saying, where that I think it's just two separate discussions here where I don't think that would be an issue at Washington, just in terms of what we know about what the NIL fund is supposed to look like and everything that we've talked about on the show, but also just in terms of it's the same thing. It's you don't want to turn down talent. You find a way to make something like that work. If it's, hey, this is one of the top offensive tackles in the transfer portal, we need him for one season. Fine, you can find a way to make that work. And I like where you're talking about on the interior. One guy that I'd be really interested in personally is Zy Chrysler from Illinois, where that's a guy who at guard, I wouldn't mind slotting in for 1 year, seeing how that worked out. But I started the conversation there because, Lars, I wouldn't be surprised if they don't take another offensive lineman moving forward. I you can feel however you will about that, but I'm just saying I wouldn't be surprised. Because the biggest reason I say that is I was impressed with Paki Finau in the Sun Bowl. I thought he looked solid. He played a little bit of left guard. I know he was in there on that final drive. And it's one of those things where get him in the weight room for another year, continue to just, add to his athleticism and let somebody like that compete. Because we talked about it after the game. We said they're not afraid to let these young guys go out there and win a spot. And this is the kind of guy who you and I both know that this coaching staff is very, very high on him and his future. So I don't think it's something where they're saying, hey, we want to bring in another guy just for 1 year and, he's going to block him or do whatever because he can still beat him out. And this coaching staff's okay with that. But I throw that out there as another possibility of, if Washington wants to roll out there with, we know Landon Hatchett's going to be at center. We just talked about the tackle situation. And then maybe Garrett Hatchett wins one guard spot and Paki wins the other. I don't know if that's necessarily an offensive line that people are going to feel amazing about, but I think the coaching staff would be very confident in that situation, considering the work that they've now been able to put in with all those guys and having them in the program for an extra year, which is a big thing that I think goes unnoticed with a lot of this, is now this coaching staff has more time. These kids are going to improve. Like that's a very important part of this equation. And again, I'm not saying that means they're in a position to say, no, we don't want X player to come to Washington. But I think that's something that they might be considering at the same time.
No, I don't disagree. I mean, I can, as you were saying that and making a good point, I kind of can you can pencil in the two deep right now. Max and Justin Hilkema left tackle. So
Sure.
1-2. So Max starter, Hilkema backup. Garen Hatchett, starter left guard, Paki backup, or you can do an and/or situation. Landon, Michael Watkins at center. And then that's where I put it. I think you go another guard. If DJ Wingfield played, I'm just gonna go back to that one because that one with the Ryan Walters connection at Purdue. Once that hire gets announced, then you can start moving things forward. It's kind of hard to say, oh hey, well we're gonna bring this kid in and then also hire his former coach. It's like just there's a certain way to do this, and I know we're in the year 2025 now, and it's even crazier than ever. But there's still a way to do things right. And so I think I would lean more in the interior because then you look at right tackle, then you have Carver Willis and Drew Party.
Yeah.
And that's a solid offensive line. If you add a DJ Wingfield or a bona fide starter at right guard, and then because then you can put Zach Henning at right guard, as that backup right guard spot, or the sixth offensive lineman, and that sort of thing. Because that's the other guy that kind of Zach played more and respectfully better than Sewane did this season. Now, I don't think he had more snaps because I think Sewane's early, starts and those sorts of things might actually give him the edge in numbers. But when you look at the two, again, like I'm not trying to call out anybody, but when we talked about guys that could transfer and the attrition and things like that, I could see Sewane following the Tafai angle of, wait, if I can go start at Boise State for a year or two, why not? And by the way, the kids should want to do that. If you are going to be a backup, there should be a backup with a plan, not which is like Paki, where Paki can be the number 2 and Gary can be the number 1, and if Paki ends up beating him out, you can kind of do that rotation similar to what they did with D'Angelo and Landon this season at center. So to me, like that, it just screams interior. Now again, going back to bring this full circle, if you do get Farmway, okay, it's a good addition. Like from a talent perspective, I like it. I just that whole hey, midway through the season sort of thing. I just that can kind of go. You don't want to. Jedd's still in the process of building the culture at Washington. You don't necessarily want to bring in guys who may or may not deter that. And the more guys you bring in with potential baggage and history, the harder that becomes to achieve.
So I see where you're going with that. And that's going to be just an interesting thing to monitor for the next couple of weeks, where if they bring in another guy, which feels like the best possible option. I want to say that. It feels like the best possible option to bring in one more experienced guy to just help out this offensive line for one more season, whoever it might be. That would be a good choice, but we wanted to throw out all the possible scenarios because we don't know what these next couple of weeks are going to look like, and they could go a whole lot of different ways. I don't think when we see people into the transfer portal, I don't think it's going to be, a Kamori House level shocker of, oh, this guy, like, why did whoever this might be decide to enter the portal? I don't think we're going to see that at any position, especially not on the offensive line, but it's just something to watch and something to consider is, are they going to try to go? Because I think they're going to take a big swing. And that's why we want to talk about Famoe is they're going to try to get, hey, this is the top talent available right now is this guy. So why are we not going to try that? They're not going to be alone in that. We know that for a fact that other Big Ten schools and SEC schools are probably banging down his door, trying to do the exact same thing that Washington is. But if you are able to secure him, that goes a long way towards protecting DeMond Williams, which at the end, and Jonah Coleman. And at the end of the day, that is the most important thing because Washington Louisville had 10 tackles for loss in the bowl game. 10. Like that is something that in 2025 is absolutely unacceptable. And 24, you can chalk it up to growing pains after, losing a Joe Moore award-winning offensive line. But in 2025, you cannot see that again.
No, I agree. That jarred my memory to think that. I feel like there was a game a couple of years ago where it was a similar woeful, just like Washington had like zero chance out front. And it's Louisville. Like you can understand it when it was Penn State. You can understand it when it's Oregon. And it's not a shot at Louisville, but there is a class in between those, upper tier schools and where Louisville is currently. But also Washington's not that far away. And, again, I think everything is trending in the right direction. Like I don't think we can wrap up at the end of the show and think that we're concerned. We're monitoring the situation. we're intrigued, but I don't think it's any cause for concern. Now, if we get to spring ball and they haven't added another offensive lineman and they didn't get Sicario and Dad leaves, then we got a problem.
Yep. It's a very different discussion. Right now, this is where you are, and you can't help but say there are a lot of pieces that look like they're moving in the right direction. Still a very long way to go, but that's where we are right now.